We're getting in the weeds here with this panel. This is really hands-on stuff, and I think we've heard a lot of comments about issues such as the importance of organizational collaboration, the importance of what kind of technologies you use for housing, the extreme importance of context, considering context, the importance of listening and consultation with those who participate and those who you're working with or in essence for. And I think we've talked about this kind of comprehensive or integrative kind of approach. In other words, what these organizations do is a lot more about simply housing. The one issue I have is maybe a question that could come into the conversation here. I'll go back to my penchant toward proverbs. There is a proverb, if I could translate it to English, that says something to the effect that 1,000 frogs peeing can make a river. You'll remember that one, right? And what I see in each of these cases is rather a small scale. We're talking about hundreds as opposed to thousands of housing units. So I'd like maybe our panelists to begin the conversation by responding perhaps each one to that issue of scale, and maybe even if you care to consider the appropriateness of considering that particular proverb in somehow coping with this issue of scale. I'd like all the panelists to respond to that, and then we'll open it up to the audience.
Non. Je ne vais réellement pas comprendre mes traductions.
I'll try.
Bon, moi pense na fait proverbe là dit.
I think that the proverb that they say, normally we see the difficulties Haitian has to put into place a real program for people that has a need for housing. That's a reality. But at the same time, we know that, like they say in a previous panel, it is not an organization or an NGOs who are going to have an impact. To have real results on housing, the state has to be directly implicated. But when you see that the state itself doesn't have an answer to the response to the problem, so you're forced to look collateral means with other organizations, so you can put in place a process to help those people who are living in under vulnerable conditions. I agree with what you said, but I think that one of the whether in the example in Teka or in the GA, we show that there's a collaboration that exists. Perhaps in the case of Iteka, I can't explain that subject completely. Other than the concrete example I gave you, we talked to the ministry, we communicated with them, we talked with the Ministry of Justice, etc. But inside the team, on the follow-up, not only when it comes to housing, but also when it comes to other projects. We've done what we call a pilot committee, a steering committee that is following the project, and that's also guiding the project. And within that, we invite the government to come and have this contribution, because we're not looking at just today. We're looking even further ahead of. I think that if the municipality has information, and it will be able to do training, it will learn how to do what we call in English in transparency and accountability, and at the same time working with the operation, because it's not normal that the government and the organization and then on one side, and then the rest of the population is on the other side. I think we have to help the population to work together, so everybody can work together. So at that point, we can feel like we have a state that's working with us all, that's also helping the population. Yes, indeed, I think it is very clear, and I'd like to add to that what Claudette said. It is clear that the day after the earthquake, it is almost as if the state not only was under the ruins, but also its intervention of the international organization made it even worse for him, put him deeper into the ruins. This is why in our own intervention, just like Bob mentioned it, it is just a series of small projects, 100 some, 80 some, etc. But these are models. These are models that they can follow. That, but in all the activities, and like you're saying, the issue of electricity, you cannot have school. There's a monopoly in Haiti. It's the EDH that give all. When it comes to water, you have to deal with DINEPA. When it comes to electricity, you have to deal with EDH. That's what's important in security. It is that the same activity when the cooperative or housing that we're promoting, even there has to be some collaboration with the state, with government. There are certain contacts at the level of CNC, because CNC has a legal framework for creating cooperative. This is why all those cooperatives they don't have an organization that's supplemented. This is why I think the works of the national NGOs and also the ones from the international, they should be done in a way to strengthening the structure of the state. Because if the state cannot intervene, and even especially since we know that the civil society doesn't have enough means to answer to all the needs, we have to indeed the civil society has to work with this with the state. This is what we call the government has to accept the civil society to work with them. They have to work with each other.
Thank you so much for that response. If we can open it up now to questions from the audience, I believe there's a microphone available. If you could just identify yourself and then pose your question.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeffrey Banks. My question, I'll try to say some stuff this real quick, but first, main one of you are the PowerPoints able to be emailed to us. My thing as far as with direct services, because I do direct services for the poverty like in the capital region, but I guess what's on my mind is like, before when we saw the video or the film clip, that if people, I guess the first question was about the land. Because the thing is, like, I guess with that video was the thing of if you're trying to build houses, which is not really that much, and you have some affluent people from the United States or Canada, like, industrialized countries, that if we're trying to go ahead and build houses or co-ops or whatever the case is, and then somebody's going to try to say, this is our land, and then they destroy it all, I guess what's the rationale or what can be done about that? Because, obviously, if we find people who are carpenters and architects, we want that housing to last versus them tearing it down. My other question is that outside of politics, I know Wycliffe John tried to run for office, but I don't know if they're looking as like saints as far as, I guess, Wycliffe John and like Sean Penn, but with all the money which they collected, especially after the earthquake, was that going to direct services, or is it mysteriously... is that money going elsewhere?
Well, I'll speak to the first issue about PowerPoints. I believe we can post those on the event registration page in the coming days, and we'll also have links to the video that you saw and then videos of the panel presentation. So I'll just state that up front and then turn it over to the panel.
Yeah.
Oui, en fait, vous voulez demander que traduction très mal.
Well, I don't know if I understood your question very well, because it was difficult for me to listen to the translation, but I can understand that it's a question mostly in the context of housing cooperative when it comes to housing in relation to a specific area. Well, I can say that one of the things that's very clear to me, it is that one of the things that I did not specify, it is that houses that was done by cooperative. It is housing that's built for the cooperative. In other words, the houses are not in the village are not for those people. The houses are for the cooperatives. For instance, for the center, people pay 100 good per month, but that money it's not administered. It is administered by the cooperative, for the village cooperative that is administering the house. The day that the person does not want to live there anymore, if the person just returns that house, that gives that house to somebody else who live there. We did it like this, so it was to avoid perverted consequences, like what we saw, like we see in the village jalousie. Like some people who have 3, 4, 5 houses, and they don't live there, but they just rent them. So we don't want the same things to happen. This is why we do it like this. The other person doesn't want to live in the village, so the person leaves, somebody else can come and live in that village. And in terms of architecture, you can see that. You can see that people we interview more in rural area, and indeed the houses, the architecture of those houses respect the architecture of the local architecture. We don't try to decorate or because each locality, each area has its own kind of architecture, its own that they've had for a very long time. And as we said, it's something that has worked because in Port-au-Prince, you see the change in the architecture, and look what happened after that. We think that if the old architecture had remained, it would have had less destruction, and perhaps at least it would have helped us to remember at least that we had 2 earthquakes before in Port-au-Prince that almost destroyed the city completely. So I don't know if that. I don't know. I don't know if I didn't understand very well what the translator said before. Question de Wyclef là. C'est donc with the question on Wyclef, it was a question of what's the percentage of the money. What's the percentage of money we need for our organization, and what's the percentage of money that we have for the activities? Okay. Well, indeed, in general, it is going to depend on the project. There are certain projects that takes a lot of money. Construction projects, like as we say, construction projects always linked. There has to be education, there has to be infrastructure, etc. These are projects that take a lot of money. And it doesn't take a lot of money in labor, but takes a lot of money in activities. Whereas, in general, when we have a budget, the budget in general has about 30%. That is for labor, that is the salary of people who are working on the project, 30-40%, and the rest, it is activities, it is the job. And I also have to say there are some activities that cost a lot, cost less, there are activities that cost more. But in general, it varies between 30, 35, 40% for labor in general. For SSCD in general, it's about 30% that we take for salary and 70% for implementation of the project.
Okay. Iteka? Okay. We do have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Any candidates? Yes, sir, right here.
Good afternoon. My name is Alfred Metelus. Congratulations for your presentations, for those presentations. I have 3 questions. First of all, it's only that I'm beginning to understand the logic that when you're talking about the housing cooperative, I thought there was a legal framework. The way you present it, you need a strategy to get to manage those, administer those houses when Gov has finished building those houses. So you can use different strategies. And the cooperative itself, it is a way, but I don't think they're going to come up with a legal framework for the financial cooperatives, what we call savings groups. I don't think they're going to have a specific group. And inside the way they're going to come up with the law, they're going to do it so they can administer those houses. We didn't talk about the houses. If I was a beneficiary who was building in Greece and you're in your ballet, and this person and in Gansi, the house is easy. If I have that house and I want to borrow money from it, if I want to, how can I use that house as a collateral to get access to credit? Secondly, the issue of housing finance is not going to be resolved if we get stuck with the humanitarian logic. If you take $40,000 and you build houses in one Monaco, you just build and then you go. Whereas if we think, if we can use that $40 million, you can use it many times before. You take a firm, it builds 200 houses. After that, we're going to look for people to live there, and that's it. To live in those houses, that's it. Whereas we can all the time use the money, try to figure out new techniques to keep on building new houses because our population is young, is getting more and more children. That's it. If we have children, we have all the vote. We have to find a way to get out of that humanitarian logic. I don't know if Mrs. Wiley can answer that question. I think it's beautiful. I think it's one of the beautiful houses that was done by some non-governmental organization. Can you tell us a bit about the technique of construction? Because it doesn't seem like there is iron in these houses. Do you have iron? Do you have enough information to tell us about the technical construction techniques that you've used to build those houses? The technique, I can tell you, it's of course there is iron in those houses, but it's not just with the traditional blocks. The kind of blocks that we use, that we've done, it's like exactly there's a male and a female. There's one that comes one way, and there's another one that comes the other way. So if there is an earthquake, those blocks will shake, but they will not necessarily break. But we have blocks, we have cement, we have iron. But the kind of houses, it's made thinking about the possibility of hurricane and also earthquake. Yes, indeed, about the legal framework. Housing cooperative. It is true that there is a legal framework for credit cooperative. Even the model is opposite to the one for cooperative. This is why we think we need a different kind of legal framework. In any case, we have a new proposal that we brought to CNC, which is how we say what kind of model of housing cooperative work to have a housing to have a credit cooperative. It says how much money each person has to give. These are social capital, whereas housing cooperative functions differently. It's really two different kinds of cooperative, and it needs different kind of legal treatment. When it comes to the issue of guarantee, it is an asset that a person can use. We get to a point where we have a specific problem that we have to give a specific answer to. The houses that are in the community that the person has built, well, at a certain moment, the person may decide that he's going to do whatever it is. But the houses in the village, it is not for one person, it is for the cooperative. So the individual cannot cannot personally give any kind of guarantee on. Perhaps that's going to depend on the cooperative. If the cooperative has an employee, as a someone who's cooperating with them, one of its members who needs a certain guarantees, the cooperative can give that guarantee, but it's not the person, the individual who gives the guarantee. And it's because it is to prevent to have perverted effects, like somebody who has 3-4 houses and doesn't live in any of them. Yes, I agree with you. You cannot do things just based on humanitarian. That's why I think humanitarian housing is just an answer. When a cooperative is legally recognized and it has a project and it goes to the government and government gives a part of its financing, and it goes and the cooperative goes and look for other sources of financing, what's going to happen is, what happens with cooperative, you can have a marriage of private and public sectors. At that point, the government has finances a certain percentage, and the cooperative goes and look for another percentage. At that point, it becomes a business. As it becomes a business, the housing itself becomes accessible available to those who are the most vulnerable. You can have a lot of houses, but it's not available. It's not. Most people cannot afford it. It's not affordable to a lot of people. This is why what we're talking about, a marriage of the private and the public sector, where we're going to have houses that are affordable to people who are vulnerable. For instance, we remember that we ask those people to pay 100 good a month. So some people, I'm not just saying it, some people don't even receive 100 good a month. But you have to realize that. So you have to get a certain type of housing. So each person most people can get a house to live in.
Okay, folks, we've come to the end of this panel. I'm sorry, sir, we have to stop now, but maybe you can grab the panelists and ask a question in informal period. Thanks to our 3 panelists for their wonderful presentations.